The last time the Indian Prime Minister was in China, it was 2018. A very different time, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping were still friendly. Doklam border disputes did cast a shadow, but the bright promises of bonhomie chased those shadows away. So much so that a year later, Chinese President Xi came for an informal meeting in Tamil Nadu. The two leaders talked business in Chennai. And in Mahabalipuram, there were two friends reveling in the ancient culture and tradition of greatest civilizations of all times. And then a year later, the two neighbors turned into bickering enemies. Galwan border disputes snowballed into a bigger conflict along the line of actual control in Ladakh. For the first time in 40 years, fires were exchanged. Direct flights between the two countries stopped. In fact, all signs and gestures of friendliness stopped. After 4 years of border disputes, things started to look up in 2025. The Indian Prime Minister was invited personally by the Chinese President to attend the SCO summit in Tianjin in China. Once again, the dragon and the tiger look each other in the eye and hope for peace and prosperity.
Hello and welcome to the special edition. The Indian Prime Minister's visit to China is very significant because he's going to China after 7 long years. The Chinese president hasn't come to India as well for 6 long years now. But why is that important when they've met a number of times between then and now in different international locations? It is important because in the first term of Narendra Modi as Indian Prime Minister, the two leaders visited each other's countries at least once a year. Chinese President Xi Jinping came to India thrice between 2014 and 2019, Ahmedabad, Goa and then Chennai. Modi went to China 4 times in that same period, but then Galwan border disputes derailed everything. Here's how.
China's port city of Tianjin will host this year's SCO meet. Leaders from 10 Eurasian countries would meet and pave the way for better geopolitical integration. The Prime Minister of India and President of China will be meeting in China for the first time since 2020 Galwan border disputes and COVID pandemic caused both the dragon and the tiger to maintain freezing distance. Things were very different a decade ago. Prime Minister Modi was barely a year old in Delhi power corridors when he visited China and held meetings with President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Keqiang. That was May 2015. The trip served as a quid pro quo for Chinese leader Xi Jinping's late 2014 visit to India. He came to Modi's Ahmedabad in his first official visit to India. There was tremendous personal chemistry between the two leaders that paved the way for $20 billion in Chinese investment pledges as well as 12 different agreements for cooperation across various fields. Xi in return hosted Modi in his hometown, Shanghai. The selfie moment captured became iconic. They held wide-ranging discussions on matters like terror, boundary dispute and confidence-building measures at the summit-level talks.
We are two of the world's largest economies and among its fastest growing major economies. We have enormous economic synergies. We also face similar challenges. We have some similar experiences. We have both seen differences in the pace of development in different parts of our countries. Our economic relations are growing rapidly. During President Xi's visit last year, we set for ourselves an ambitious plan to take our economic relations to a new level.
A year later, when the duo met again at the G20 summit in Hangzhou, the relations between the two Asian giants had been on a downward trajectory. Over China vetoing India's petitions to ban Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Masood Azhar in the UN Security Council, India cautioned China over the multi-billion-dollar China-Pakistan economic corridor being laid through POK. A month later, Xi Jinping was in Goa to attend the BRICS summit. Modi and Xi held fruitful discussions on key issues, including terrorism, NSG, and enhancing trade and investment. And then on June 16, 2017, the face-off on Doklam Plateau in Doklam area of Bhutan between India and Chinese soldiers started. Prime Minister Narendra Modi informally met President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Hamburg, Germany in July, and had a conversation on a range of issues. But it was not a formal bilateral meeting between the two leaders, as the atmosphere was not right for official dialogue between Modi and Xi. After 73 days, the Doklam face-off was resolved through diplomatic channels, and Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping held a substantive bilateral meeting at Xiamen in September 2017. The course for a new forward-looking round of engagement anchored by fresh mechanisms to ensure calm at the borders was set. The two leaders reaffirmed their understanding that differences shouldn't be allowed to become disputes.
सीमा पर अभी भी देखा जाए तो तनाव है। तनाव मतलब स्थिति बेहतर हुई है, लेकिन अभी भी गड़बड़ है। सेनाएं डिप्लॉयड है, 50,000 सैनिक डिप्लॉयड है। भारत अभी भी नज़र रखे हुए है। चीन भी अपनी डेवलपमेंट करता जा रहा है, नए नए बेसिस बनाता जा रहा है। तो ये सब देखते हुए एक तरफ चीन अपने भारत को घेरने की काम कर रहा है, दूसरी तरफ भारत भी सुरक्षा के हिसाब से काम कर रहा है। चौकस रहना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि चाइना का इतना क्लियर नहीं रहता है हिसाब किताब। कहीं भी हम देखते हैं कि उनकी तैयारियां भी पीछे चल रही हैं, साथ साथ भारत को घेरने की भी तैयारी कर रहे हैं। श्रीलंका के साथ संबंध, बांग्लादेश के साथ संबंध, पाकिस्तान, म्यांमार, इसके अलावा बाकी जो देश हैं इनके द्वारा, जिसको स्ट्रिंग ऑफ पर्ल्स कहते हैं, भारत को घेरने का भी काम हो रहा है। यूनाइटेड नेशन में भी वो पाकिस्तान का साथ देते हैं। तो ऐसे में क्या हम इनके ऊपर पूरा भरोसा करें? आज भी कई बार वो अरुणाचल की बात छेड़ देते हैं, कई बार अपने गांव के नाम बदली कर देते हैं। तो ये भरोसा हम तभी कर सकते हैं, पूरा भरोसा तभी कर सकते हैं जब उनके व्यवहार में बदली हो। भारत तैयार है।
Roughly 6 months later, Modi-Xi's camaraderie once again made waves during the Heart-to-Heart Summit in the central Chinese city of Wuhan in April 2018. They had a series of one-on-one informal interactions. Doklam wounds were still very fresh. Modi and Xi decided that they will issue strategic guidance to their respective militaries to strengthen communication and to build trust and understanding. A couple of months later in June, Prime Minister Modi went to the Chinese port city of Qingdao to attend the SCO summit of 2018. And then finally, in August 2018, India got the Chinese side to reach an agreement to resolve the situation with the disengagement of border personnel at Doklam. A year later, Mahabalipuram was the grand host for the two giant leaders to meet, greet and talk. 2019 Chennai talks of the Modi-Xi was the second informal meeting and the last one held so far. The two leaders agreed that they need to work together to fight radicalization and terrorism as common challenges.
चेन्नई समिट में अब तक हमारे बीच द्विपक्षीय और वैश्विक मुद्दों पर महत्वपूर्ण विचार विनिमय हुआ है। वुहान स्पिरिट ने हमारे संबंधों को एक नया मोमेंटम और ट्रस्ट दिया। आज के हमारे चेन्नई कनेक्ट से दोनों देशों के बीच सहयोग का एक नया दौर शुरू होगा।
As the calendar turned its page, 2020 became the pandemic year of lockdown. India and China clashed at Pangong So in Ladakh. It all started in May 2020. On 7th September 2020, for the very first time in 45 years, shots were fired along the line of actual control, with both sides blaming each other. What started in Galwan in summer of 2020 spread to Pangong So and Gogra Hot Springs in 2021, and most recently to Demchok and Depsang in October 2024. In the past few months of 2025, both sides have made progress. Talks have resulted in pilgrim and tourist movement after years of frozen relationships. The two leaders haven't met on each other's soil since the 2019 meeting in Chennai, which was Xi Jinping's last India visit. June 2018 Qingdao was the last time Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in China. It has taken roughly 7 years for the two Asian giants to meet in either country. Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, here's what experts have to say on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's crucial visit to China and Japan. Listen in. You had tweeted about it, and that's a very significant message that you put out, that everybody's focused on China, but the more important visit is Japan. In your appreciation, what is the big takeaway that you see from this visit of Prime Minister Modi in Japan?
There is an annual summit that the two countries are supposed to hold, but that annual summit is not being held annually. So it's very good that Prime Minister Modi has gone to China at this time by going to Japan. By going to Japan, he has balanced his China trip, which is a very good signal, because the Chinese leaders, as we all know, often come to India, then go to Pakistan, or go to Pakistan, come to India. But Modi is showing that India can also play the same card. Japan and China have been historical rivals, and the Prime Minister's trip to Tokyo before going to Tianjin for the SCO summit is a very good message to Beijing. It's important to remember that Japan, India, and China make a strategic triangle. In the strategic triangle, if Japan is B and India is C, B plus C will always be greater than A, which is China. If B plus C will always be greater than A economically and militarily. So India-Japan partnership is vital for Asian power balance and stability. Unfortunately, at the moment, Prime Minister Ishiba's future hangs in the balance. Yet, the institutionalized collaboration that has developed between India and Japan, that will continue irrespective of who's the Prime Minister in Tokyo or in New Delhi. This is a relationship between two natural allies. Look at it, Geeta, that when the Prime Minister goes to Tianjin and meets with Xi Jinping, he'll be discussing how to manage differences, how to moderate disputes, temper down disputes. But in Tokyo, his discussions with Ishiba have been about reinforcing an already flourishing strategic and economic partnership. So right. It's a stark contrast to the kind of discussions that you will have in Tianjin.
Well, absolutely. Ambassador Sajjan, stark contrast, but would you agree that this was a very crucial visit, and clubbing Japan with the China visit that was because of SCO certainly is clear messaging from Indian side?
Absolutely. And thank you very much, Geeta. I think in the past also, if you remember the first visit that Prime Minister Modi had undertaken to China, he'd gone to Mongolia, he'd gone to South Korea, along with those visits. And I think sometime later, Again, when he went to China, he also came to Vietnam. So I think the Prime Minister always tries to balance those visits. The second point that I would like to make is, that is a visit to Tianjin and China is an international commitment. It is the annual summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Barring last year when Prime Minister could not go because of the parliament session in India immediately after the elections here, and 2023 when we were hosting our own summit, Prime Minister Modi has attended all SCO summits. So that was a given. But I think coming to Japan, particularly in the context of the geopolitical changes, the turbulence, and the flux that is taking place, I think for bilateral reasons, in terms of strengthening the economic and strategic cooperation, also sending out a message, as has been mentioned, to China, but also sending out a message to the United States, because both India and Japan are at the receiving end as far as the tariffs from Mr. Trump are concerned. So I think on a variety in a variety of perspectives, this was a very significant visit. And if you look at the outcomes, Geeta, then of course the significance and the importance of this visit in bilateral context, regional and global context increases all the more.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to China's Tianjin for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, that is SCO Summit, isn't just another diplomatic stop. It's his first China trip in 7 years, a high-stakes moment that could recalibrate Asia's power balance, from Galwan's shadow to global trade. This visit may redefine India-China dynamics. Here's a report.
Narendra Modi's upcoming trip to Tianjin for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit is far more than a ceremonial visit. It marks his first trip to China in 7 years, and it could well reshape the balance of power in Asia. Relations between India and China have always been a complex mix of cooperation and confrontation. The 2020 Galwan Valley clashes were a breaking point. Lives were lost, trust collapsed, and ties sank to their lowest in decades. But 5 years on, New Delhi and Beijing appear ready for what some are calling a strategic reset.
China was ripped up by Xi Jinping and his actions in 2020, which culminated in Galwan, where 20 brave Indian soldiers lost their lives and several Chinese soldiers died as well. Now that was a red line, so to speak, between India-China relations, but things have moved on since then. The relationship is not as adversarial as it used to be in 2020. It looked like India and China were going to go to war, but now that seems to have abated. A better sense seems to have prevailed in Beijing, and what we've been seeing over the last couple of months, beginning with the summit in Kazan, was a warming, a thawing of ties between India and China. There was a certain outreach made by China, and India seems to have reciprocated.
At the heart of this lies India's foreign policy evolution. Gone are the days of Cold War non-alignment. What we see today is multi-alignment, a deliberate strategy to engage all major powers while preserving strategic autonomy. India is not choosing sides, it is choosing options.
आप अगर पुराने रिकॉर्ड देखेंगे, सदियों तक चीन और भारत एक दूसरे से सीखते रहे हैं और दोनों मिलकर के दुनिया की भलाई के लिए कोई न कोई कंट्रीब्यूट करते रहे। ग्लोबल पुराने जो रिकॉर्ड्स है कहते हैं कि दुनिया का जो जीडीपी का था, उसका 50% से ज्यादा अकेले भारत और चीन का हुआ करता था। इतना बड़ा कंट्रीब्यूशन।
Economics is a big driver here. Despite tensions, China remains India's second largest trading partner. Yes, the trade deficit bothers New Delhi, but the reality is India's manufacturing ambitions still depend on Chinese components and raw materials. Put simply, India cannot industrialize at scale without some level of cooperation with Beijing. Security is another key layer. The SCO, once focused on fighting terrorism, has now grown into a platform that offers an alternative to Western-led institutions.
The SCO was established with the primary goal of countering three evils of terrorism, separatism, and extremism, which continue to remain a challenge. Today, as a regional platform, there is a broader range of sectors of cooperation among the SCO members.
For India, active participation ensures its voice is heard in multiple forums without getting trapped in one-sided alliances. Border management is perhaps the most immediate concern. The revival of the long-dormant Special Representatives framework is a breakthrough. Both sides are exploring early harvest solutions, resolving simpler segments of the contested border first, leaving harder disputes for later. It's pragmatic, if not ambitious. Then there's the American angle. Washington's tariff war, particularly under Donald Trump, has rattled New Delhi. India still values its partnership with the US but doesn't want to appear overly dependent. Engaging China helps India widen its options and sends a clear signal. India will not be boxed in.
साथ होना ना सिर्फ बेनिफिशियल है बल्कि ग्लोबल स्टेबिलिटी और प्रॉस्पेरिटी के लिए भी जरूरी है। और जब 21वीं सदी एशिया की सदी है तो हम तो चाहेंगे कि भारत चीन के बीच में स्पर्धा सब स्वाभाविक है। स्पर्धा कोई गलत चीज नहीं है। ये संघर्ष नहीं होना चाहिए।
But let's be clear, this is not a love story. Beijing's tight embrace of Pakistan and its growing naval footprint across the Indian Ocean remain red flags for India. Old suspicions cannot be wished away. Still, the ripple effects of Modi's China Gambit could be significant. A revived Russia-India-China trilateral, dormant for over a decade, may re-emerge as all three grapple with Western pressure. That would be a big shift in global power politics.
I mean, these are two countries who are neighbors. They lost trust over Galwan and other issues. It is time for these two civilization states realize that neither one of them are going anywhere, that there has to be a resolution to the issues in there. Trust has to be built slowly based on actions, not words. But you have to start somewhere. And while you can have suspicions about anybody, you can point to this and that, the issue is, what is the future? Want a future under the United States where, whoever is in power is going to dictate what you do. And if you fight back, you're involved in an asymmetrical conflict, which is very difficult to win. Or do you want to be a proud nation that determines its own future in a multipolar world where consensus, right, and cooperation are the main key elements?
In truth, Modi's Tianjin visit is not about resolving every dispute. It is about creating space. For China, easing tensions with India blunts America's containment efforts. For India, engaging China while staying close to the West is multi-alignment in action. The world is moving towards multipolarity. Whether China and India can compartmentalize their rivalries while cooperating on shared interests will determine not just Asia's stability, but the very architecture of the global order. And that is why Tianjin matters. With Farhan Khan, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
2025 is expected to rewrite and rework, or rather mend relations between India and China. The two neighbors need to stand together. They are the Asian giants and in many ways the future leaders of a new world order that's not driven by the West but led by the East. That's all we have time for in this special edition.